Board of Education Budget Question and Answer Workshop. Would you all please silence your cell phones and stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First on the agenda, we have Assemblymember Pat Fahey to speak, and I don't think she's here yet, so we'll just adjust our agenda when she makes it. Next, we have agenda items. First up is the tax certiorari settlement, and I'll turn this over to Andrew.
Thank you. So tonight, for the board's approval, is a settlement in the tax certiorari claim from Macy's. This covers the years 2019, 2020, 21, and 22. It lowers the assessment, resulting in a total refund of $373,622.59. Most of that comes from the school district, and then the rest will come from the library, we pay their share and they bill us. This will also freeze the assessment going forward for the years 2024 and 2025. The assessment, or the refund, is much lower than what Macy's had originally sought in their claim. So the gap between the refund and what they had originally filed for is about $600,000.
Motion to accept the resolution. Nate, second. Rebecca, any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Passes 9-0. Thank you. Next, Communications Committee. I'll turn this over to Gloria.
Let me turn my mic on here. Thanks, Seema, and thanks for the opportunity. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? No, I'm not muted. I'm not muted. Can you hear me now? I guess so. Thanks for this opportunity to talk a little further. Apparently, over the past week, there were some concerns and questions raised regarding the Communications Committee report that we had given regarding the meeting that we usually hold every year for prospective board members. It was going to be a little different this year. So anyway, about a year and a half ago, Communications Committee started talking about how we could encourage the community to become more involved in Board of Education elections. We discussed things like how to inform the community more about the role of board members. We talked about somehow inviting people in so that we could talk more personally to them if they had interests or questions. We talked about sharing with the public what our responsibilities are and what the importance is of the Board of Education. So that was back in January of 22. The following fall, when we first met for this school year, which was in September, we then set our goals. And one of the goals we set for ourselves was to enhance our advertisement, our posting materials, and outreach to recruit more candidates, especially from diverse groups of people in our community and from diverse backgrounds. So we put that as one of our priorities, and we shared that with the board in September. Then in February 15th, the committee began talking seriously about how to get this started. One of the things we've always done, as many of you remember when Neil was here, he and Marie did this program for people who were interested in running for the board. And it was done at a time where people had already picked up petitions and had indicated that they were going to run. But what we had been talking about at the Communications Committee was maybe answering questions beforehand, before people, maybe they weren't ready to make a commitment, but to kind of just get some information. So we talked at the committee and we proposed, this is when I reported to the board, that we hold the meeting a little earlier before the petitions were due. So we proposed April 3rd. And we thought at that meeting we could spend some time answering questions about general responsibilities of the board and just kind of putting people's minds at ease so that they could make a more informed decision regarding whether or not they wanted to go ahead and run. So that's where we ended. but I guess over the last week, I know there was some discussion, or there were some questions raised and concerns raised. So this is a good opportunity for us to try to clarify what we're about. Our intent in this whole thing was, of course, to kind of expand interest in the community in the Board of Education, to plant the seed in people's minds about maybe they would be interested in running. That was our original intent, and it's been our intent all along. So I'm open to any discussions or questions. Marie, I don't know if you would like to add anything, you know.
The only thing I'll add was we started doing the workshops around appropriate ways to campaign, I want to say about 5 years ago. And we typically did them after people turned in their petitions. And then last year we had a candidate who had already printed their yard signs and had used the school logo, which isn't allowed. So we felt bad that the individual had, spent resources to create signs that couldn't be used. That's one of the reasons why we thought if we move this workshop up and include those topics that Gloria just mentioned, as well as the campaign do's and don'ts, we would, prevent that from happening again. So that was the rest of the thinking.
Kim, go ahead.
Hi. I was one of the people that actually sent an email in just questioning, because I think that that's a great thing to get people involved with the Board of Education and explain what the position entails. However, the date is 2 weeks before all the signatures need to be done, and I feel that this is something that really we should start getting people involved way earlier if we're going to actually do this. Like, instead of, because I did this last year for the first time, where we go through the do's and don'ts and what we're allowed to do, things like that. But if we really want to get people involved, then I think we need to start them way earlier in the game and have them actually understand what the board does and give them more opportunities to maybe come to the meetings and get the position. 2 weeks before just seems really tight, and it just doesn't seem like a lot of time to get people who are genuinely involved and want to run for the board.
I mean, I don't disagree that it's a tight time frame, but I mean, it's an informational session. People that are going to come are going to probably be already interested. So you are going to draw some, I mean, I agree. Next year, better planning, do it earlier. But I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it 2 weeks earlier, doing it what it is now, understanding that next year we got to make sure we're ahead of the game. I mean, it's you want to get the information out as quickly as you can. Doing it afterwards is a problem. Doing it earlier is ideal, and even doing it earlier than this year is more ideal. So I don't think the meeting or the informational session is the wrong idea, with the understanding that next year we got to be a little more proactive in getting it out there early. Yep. I mean, the point is to try to get people involved and to let people understand the work and the commitment and the time involved with being on the board. It's an informational session more than anything.
I was one of the people who agreed that it needed to occur earlier based on if people are going to take that commitment and are going to be interested. I would hope that they would be attending board meetings and taking that active role to learn from it, besides just the 2 weeks prior to when we are collecting the signatures, but throughout the school year taking a more active role in the process if it's truly something that they're going to commit and invest in, to learn about what we do and what it involves for the district, more than just right before it's time to run.
It's also kind of hard to say that we're looking for diversity, but we're giving them 2 weeks
Before the signature date to learn more. I guess I kind of have a problem with that too, because if we really are genuinely looking for other people to run within these positions and get interested in these positions, then 2 weeks before to me just kind of seems like we're just throwing it out there, just like, okay, if there's anyone last minute that's thinking about this, instead of someone who's really been thinking.
If it's something we're going to discuss for next year, I think that there should be a recommendation that comes from the subcommittee, and then the board have an opportunity to discuss it. The way it was presented to us last meeting was a date had already been selected. And since that impacts incumbents, I think there should be a fair and open discussion. My 2 cents.
Again, all I'm hearing complaints about the timing. And this was discussed, Gloria, I love Gloria, and her committee meeting reports, quite frankly, last longer than the actual meetings sometimes. So, and I love you, Gloria, great reports. But, this was something that was discussed at the Communications Committee a lot, and it was brought up, not last meeting, multiple meetings ago, and I agree, next year it should be earlier, but it still should be before the deadline, regardless of whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks. And if you get somebody to come in at the last 2 weeks and they get the time to get the signatures, great. But I don't think it's a disadvantage to anybody because it's just 2 weeks before the deadline.
I'm going to say
The thing that probably nobody should say, but as someone who's running this year, with the date being so close to the signature date, it's bad optics. Like, I'll be honest, that's, I know we've talked about it, but this was, I agree with Blanca, where this was something where we were told, yes, because Gloria sent out the information, we really didn't, there wasn't really a discussion. It was just kind of the date was set. I'll be honest, I speak just for myself on this. It kind of seems like, okay, 2 weeks right before, let's see who else we can get. It doesn't seem genuine, because if we genuinely wanted diversity, if we wanted people interested, just my opinion, no opinion of anyone else on this board, we would have gotten them in sooner instead of sticking it 2 weeks before signatures, because everyone sitting up here who's had to get signatures knows that's difficult.
Again, I think the optics are the other way. The idea that we won't want to do a meeting to encourage people to run, regardless of what the timing is, because we worry that it negatively affects the people on this board, I think that's the bad look. Where, look, 95% of what we talk about in communications is how do we get people involved? How do we get people interested in what's going on in the district? Not just at the board level, just coming and doing stuff. PTAs, volunteering, coaching, any number of things. This is an important step, and this isn't a meeting that wasn't been done in the past. We're just moving it up and adding a board member to answer questions so that people have questions, they can do that. Again, I think people coming to this meeting are already going to be interested. So I don't think it's a matter of like we're out there recruiting people.
I didn't say recruiting, but you're on the communications committee then, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you know more than we do sitting here. Like the way it was presented, like Blanca said, for us sitting here, that's not the case. So I understand where you're coming from, but you also have to understand where we're coming from as people who are not on that same committee.
Blanca's on the committee.
And she's still,
Well, yeah, I wasn't actually speaking for myself. I've known about it, but I didn't know a date had been picked, and then I heard from other board members who were also caught off guard.
Yeah.
I always thought that on a subcommittee, we come up with an idea and bring it to the board, and the board says, sure, this date sounds good, this idea sounds good. So that is what I am advocating for, which is that we follow that process
So,
next time.
does anybody have anything new to add? Because it sounds like there's some differing views. So it sounds like there was some miscommunications on the communications committee and how that process happened getting out to here. So maybe we can come to some kind of compromise so we can move on, because it doesn't seem like a huge issue. So maybe, because in the past there's been these information sessions where they teach you about campaigning, it could just be more about that. And then next year, start earlier with actually trying to get people involved who are interested. I'm just trying to come up with a compromise. I don't really care either way, but I don't want to get stuck on this because
seeing that I seem to be the only one that has like a huge issue, at least right now sitting here, I will back off and say whatever you guys decide to do is fine. Kelly?
Well, speaking from somebody that ran last year, there doesn't seem to be a lack of interest in running for the board. Like, there was 10 people or so that ran for the board. Even past years, maybe, I don't know exactly what you mean by looking for diverse people, like if there's something particular, but I think our backgrounds on the board are fairly diverse. I mean, if people want to come, they should absolutely come to the meeting. We should absolutely talk to them. But to ask current sitting incumbents to go out and, well, maybe that's not exactly what the meeting is about, but to recruit people to run against them seems uncomfortable, I guess. But I think it's great to have the meeting earlier to do exactly what Dr. Wiles mentioned, to help the process along, to make sure people aren't doing things that are not within guidelines.
Oh, sorry, go. Go ahead, Gloria.
To talk.
You're muted.
You're muted again.
No, I'm not muted.
Oh.
Don't mute it. I think it's.
Try again.
The only reason why we can't have on the website a list of do's and don'ts, like why it has to be.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I've been trying to speak for the last 15 minutes, but obviously I couldn't get through. I'm really upset by some of the comments that are being made, mainly because communication, and I appreciate Nate, that you appreciate me, but my reports are meant, and Marie takes the minutes, so I really use her minutes a lot, are meant to be, complete. And every time I give those reports, very, very rarely is there anything. I always say it's proposed, we discussed, and no one ever offers anything more than that. I mean, I don't come to you and say, well, we decided this is it. It's always, this is what we talked about. We've been talking about it for a year and a half. We got to this point. Oh, we can argue it could be earlier. Absolutely. Sure, I'd love to do it earlier. But to tell you the truth, I don't think people are thinking about running for the board in September. But I would be more than willing to start earlier. But I think as we get closer now to the election, the budget vote and all, people are beginning to think. And I agree with Nate, I don't see anything wrong with having an opportunity for people to come and ask questions. That's all we're giving them the opportunity to do. And everyone, and I'm sorry, Blanca, that you didn't, you weren't at the meeting, I guess, that meeting that we set the date, or we proposed the date. So I don't know about that, but the people that were there, that was a date we proposed because we wanted to give people a little extra time just to think about it. If they have questions, they may not even run, but at least to offer the community the opportunity to come in and talk. We're not recruiting people. We're giving them the opportunity to find out what we do. That's what we're about. We're supposed to be, that's what communications, one of the people we're supposed to be communicating with is our community. And we want them to be involved. We want them to support us. And I'm sorry that this has been totally misconstrued, totally. Because we've been talking about it on communications. I've been reporting about it 4 times at least in a year and a half. And it was one of our priority and goals this year that we set. And I felt that, it's something that we thought was important enough to move on.
Come to some kind of compromise, because it sounds like there's a good number of people on both sides feel differently about this. So we don't have to get stuck on this issue. I mean, I don't think there's any harm in, if the communications committee has been reporting on this, but the timing seems kind of not so convenient for those people who are running again. I can understand how that feels, but maybe it just be an information session about the do's and don'ts, like it has been in the past. And then, I don't know, some of you are looking really upset about this, so I just want to move on. Just, what can we do to compromise here?
I'll do whatever you guys decide to do. What I would suggest for next year, it doesn't necessarily have to be September. We don't have to go there because nobody knows. But maybe something in January or February, even for next year, like this year, we'll have an information meeting. We'll have people show up. It's not a matter of trying to deter, but just the timing of really letting people know, like even before the budget process, like letting them know what the position entails and what you actually go through and things like that. That's it. But I'll go with whatever you guys decide to go with.
The middle ground here. I have right here
She's
the.
raising her hand, I'm sorry. Oh, she's been like.
Oh, go ahead.
Raising.
Can you hear me?
Immunodeficiency virus. Right. before, after Thomas Anderson took a certain pill in a 1999 movie, he was being referred to.
Can you hear me?
Was he up? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
British office mate asks if you can spare a drawing. The body part of the shut up. Sorry. Melissa Brown? Brandon.
Testing?
Yeah.
3 or 4 page document that we could easily post to our website that really covers the big topics that were intended for this informational session to be. So posting to the website, I think, is a great idea, but sometimes people want to ask, well, what does this look like in Guilderland? That was the idea of having an informational session. I think for what was talked about on April 3rd was not intended to be recruitment, because it's too late for recruiting. It's really clarity on what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, what are the do's and don'ts of campaigning. What questions do you have? It also gives people a chance to meet, from the board, and Andrew and me, and just get a sense of what's what. So we can post this tomorrow. And then just need some guidance if we want to go back to our original plan and continue to host the campaign do's and don'ts that we've done in the past later in April, or forge ahead with the 3rd. I mean, we're prepared to do whatever the board would like.
Oh, that's great. And also then, we'll have our meeting, and it's far enough ahead before people decide or whatever, so that for this year, I mean, we can't change, or it doesn't make any sense to change it at this point, but if people are concerned, then, try and be responsive to that. And I hope we have enough people who are interested, that it makes a difference. Okay.
Family-owned, just born candy company in Bethlehem. Charts for the peaks. Those are peaks. They're at $2,800. You have a $600.
So are we trying for April 3rd, or are we going to postpone to a date after? You've done them late in April previously, so that's, I think, the guidance that we need.
When does our creating start at different levels of the ball?
We've had it every year, like for the last 5 years or so.
It's usually the people
Who turn in their petitions get invited. Yeah. An hour in the conference room, and Neil typically did it. He had a PowerPoint, it maybe lasted 45 minutes.
Beforehand is running, so you may miss people that are running that have not been in their positions yet. So if they're running, we don't know about it. How are we going to tell them? How are they going to know about it? And then just you know who's running when they turn in their petitions, then knows the people you reach out to. So you might miss the opportunity to talk to
Well, we know who takes out petitions.
Again, if you have the information here.
So we have a board meeting next week. So maybe we can just table this, because it doesn't sound like people are coming up with a resolution, so we can move on and actually bring it to the regular meeting, and you guys can think about it.
The only thing I'll say is then we're down to days between that, and so we won't be able to get word out that it's happening.
That everybody's sitting here waiting.
After the budget Q&A?
Yeah, can we just move it down?
Can I
Great.
just ask one question about this? What time was it? Sorry, I'm so sorry. What time was the meeting supposed to be?
Not set the time. And I realize there's a conflict that night. I do realize that.
Okay, so why don't we move on to the budget Q&A, and if people still have comments about this, we can come back to it. Sounds okay? Okay, so everybody doesn't have to listen. So we'll move on to the budget development workshop Q&A, and I'll turn this over to Dr. Weil.
Actually, Andrew is going to give us a little brief introduction.
Thank you.
So thank you. We are not going to do a full recap of what we did 2 weeks ago, but I do want to walk through some of the highlights of the superintendent's proposed budget for next year to set the table for the conversation and the Q&A. This is the top line budget It's an 8.99% increase with an associated 2.76% levy increase. That is below the district's tax cap calculation of 3.01%. So the budget is not levying fully to the cap, but it's taking advantage of the record increase in state aid. If we look at what is driving this budget increase, the argument I tried to make at the last meeting was much of the increase in this budget are things that are functionally out of the district's control. So this red pie, the Pac-Man eating the rest of the bars, these are 6 significant cost drivers that account for 2/3 of the proposed increase. They are capital borrowing, that is borrowing for the capital project, tax certiorari claims like the one that we discussed a few minutes ago. They are increases in health insurance, and as I explained a couple weeks ago, this is a catch-up on multiple years of very, very low health insurance increases. So it's a back-loaded increase that is very large in 1 year, but over time, still under 3% average annual increase. They are contract, transportation, and then the special education services that are both related to increased needs for special education students, and then fuel costs, and finally, legal expenses, mostly for defending those tax certiorari claims. So that is the largest makeup of the increase, and then there are contract salary increases. So right there, we are over 87% of the proposed increase. Those are the things that are, as I said, functionally out of our control. The gray bar is the governor's proposed set-aside from foundation aid for high-intensity tutoring. We have to keep that because the governor is proposing that in her budget. We will see if it makes it into the final budget in a few weeks when that comes out. Our biggest, I'd say, discretionary initiative is the middle school class size reduction. It's a little over 5%. Then we have other increases, and then BoE services. Again, BoE services increases are important because we get aid in the following year on the spending we do through BoCEs. So they're an increase in spending, but we see a benefit the following year. Programmatic highlights of this budget. First and foremost, it maintains all existing programs and services. This was a top-line point of emphasis in the thought exchange from all of the stakeholders that went into providing framework for the budget. As I said, it's reducing class sizes for 6th and 7th grades. This follows on last year's budget, or this current year budget, which reduced class sizes for 8th graders. Promoting wellness and safety through a full-time school resource officer who's already started this year, additional monitor aid hours at the middle and high schools, a new teacher positions for special ed, for ENL students, and then we're expanding athletic opportunities to try to make more inclusive environments so all students can have opportunities to participate in athletic opportunities. So this is esports, coaches for girls and boys cross country and track, and a unified bocce team. The budget is addressing student learning needs through, again, the set aside for high impact intensive tutoring. We are adding a Tableau, which is a software service that makes it much easier for us to develop or to pull out granular data about student performance, so we can really target what's working, what could use some more work. This is to make the data inclusive environment sort of a part of the district-wide culture. We have FTE increases in science, the comprehensive skills program in business, and world languages. And again, as I mentioned, the levy increase is below the cap. So this is the 5-minute recap of the presentation from a few weeks ago, and now we can turn to questions.
Yeah.
Since Assemblymember Fahey, would you like to speak? Oh, we're just at the start, so it's probably easier.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's probably easier, yeah.
Okay, well, but it's the easiest this time of year. Had one last week. Thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you, and appreciate you allowing me to interrupt. It's been a little bit insane. We're in the thick of the budget, as many of you know, and I am also a new higher education chair, so it is clearly drinking from a fire hose these days, and this is the fourth event tonight, but I wanted to get out here while I could. Because before the budget passes, I often do like to come out, and I forget what it was the last week, if it was the snowstorm or a couple of weeks ago, whatever it was that we couldn't get out here. So what I just passed out is just a summary that we had put together with compiling from a number of places. Many of you know this. It was probably more interesting about a week ago when it had first come out, but really just talking about where the Assembly is versus the Senate. I think generally there is a lot of good news. I've been here a lot of years when there's not as good a news. But generally we think there's pretty good news here, including from the governor, where we are finally paying down the foundation aid, or finally paying, I don't know how many years. I'm looking at the superintendent. I forget how many years we've had that conversation of really trying to address a whole host of needs. So I will say there's so much controversy in with the budget, especially the last couple of years. There's already so many comments about that we'll have another late budget and on and on. This is one area I feel very good that we are having, that there seems to be so much consensus that we just need to do the right thing, really do the full foundation aid, and it's just very encouraging. As many of you know, education, especially K-12 education, really dominated, probably was one of the most controversial issues that we would work on in the Assembly on a whole host of issues over the years, the over-testing, some of the Common Core, so the teacher evaluation, so many issues over the years. The last couple of years, we have plenty of other controversies, but this, I feel like we're doing what we've needed to do for so many years. So I hope it's generally good news. I'm just going to go through a couple of the numbers. It is again the $2.7 billion in increase to fully fund the foundation aid, and that really is the good news. Again, we're expecting that. Well, I have not heard that there's going to be a lot of disagreements over that. We are rejecting, the Assembly is rejecting the charter school expansion that some of you may have heard about. That's more of a downstate issue, but it's gotten a lot of attention. It is an issue in Albany and something that has been some concern, especially with the financial stability of the Albany schools. But just that is going to continue to get some attention, I guess, as we move into the final weeks of the budget. On pre-K, again, we're looking at new funding, additional funding. We're also trying to address some of the rate increases for the early adopters. Again, this has been an issue in Albany, not as much here, obviously, but trying to address the rate increase and figure that some of that out. The BoCs, I know some of these have been issues in the past, the reimbursable salary cap. I'm just going to pick out, so that is in there. We've got an increase on that. There's been some concern about the governor's proposal to do this set-aside within foundation aid for the high-impact tutoring, sorry. That's a $250 million that she had set aside. That is not something that the Assembly is supportive of. There's been a lot of pushback or concerns on that, and I think generally our feeling is that to provide more flexibility to the districts like yourself. So I hope that that's reassuring news. I don't get the sense, again, I don't get the sense that has a lot of support in the Assembly. So I think the intent is to give more flexibility to the districts. I'm just going to go and jump around a little bit. The free meals, I welcome your input and comments on this. The free lunch, that is, some of that has originated in the Assembly with one of my colleagues. And quite frankly, I'm a co-sponsor of that bill, but I also see the downside. And one of the while it makes sense on the surface, and clearly we want to, there's always been the issues of stigma with those who are getting free lunch and those who are not. So, but now I've also heard some pushback on that, on the staffing issue, that given this staffing shortages everywhere return, that could possibly fuel some staffing shortages. And I welcome your feedback on that. But at this point, it's a big number. It's a very big number. But at this point, it is in our budget, and I know there's been, again, as I said, I'm a co-sponsor, but I'm just trying to give you what I'm hearing on all sides of that, and I really welcome your feedback on it. There's so many needs where I've heard some mixed things on this, so I welcome the feedback. We've restored all the HEOP, the higher education opportunity programs, and even put in a 5% increase. The governor had proposed a cut there. We restore and have added to libraries. Libraries are always something we are quite supportive of in the Assembly. With regard to adult ed, every year that's a fight, and this year we're actually increasing it more significantly than in the past. I'm just trying to jump to some of the ones that may be of interest. There's a number of smaller programs that have gotten funding over the years in various, some of these are just specials that have gotten funding over the years in various school districts. The zero emission school buses, that is something that I have supported in the past. We are certainly hearing from folks about the implementation of that. Those of you that know me know that I have tried to push the incentives over the years to make sure that we are moving that way. CDTA was, our local CDTA was one of the first adopters of electric transit buses, and they've been very successful, very popular because they're noise-free, they're emissions-free, so they've been very popular, and he's actually trying to get more on, increase the amount of the buses. But we have heard from a number of school districts that the cost and the timeline is a challenge. So I think I think it makes a lot of sense to give some flexibility there. So you're going to see some flexibility. I don't know if it's going to go far enough, but the idea is to just move in this direction without, bankrupting. Nowadays, electric passenger vehicles just this year have really become comparable. The reports are they're comparable cost to a traditional passenger vehicle. Clearly, we're not there yet with buses. So it's not a comparable cost. I'd like to say when I come back next year, in the next couple of years, we will move in that direction, but I know it's not comparable. I do think it's where we want to move, but we need to make sure we're giving the incentives and the funding. So welcome the feedback on that as well. That is probably, I'm just trying to, I had a marked up copy previously and don't have it now. The last page just shows you some of the differences between the executive, the Senate, and ourselves. Child care, that's a little bit misleading there because we had done so much in child care in last year in particular, $7 billion over multiple years. So that last page can be a little bit misleading. I don't want to go out of protocol, but if it's okay, I'd welcome questions if appropriate. Not sure if I'll look to upward chair. If that's appropriate. Okay, thank you, Judy. Yes,
hi.
Again, I know I'm disrupting, and I know you always have a busy schedule,
No.
so appreciate the accommodation.
I'm interested just the zero emission, to prepare for it, the cost of redoing the garages and all that
The
is so
infrastructure.
big, and the time frame that was originally proposed is too short. So I appreciate, at least as an individual, and I think as a member of the board, that you are trying to at least slow it down a little bit so that we can see how it works and we can begin to make those changes.
Yes, and I know some of the districts that I've talked to are really moving toward some of the vans that they use, the smaller, not the full-size buses, but the smaller the 8-passenger ones for some of the programs. So I know there's movements, but yes, I think it makes sense, given that there is still, remember, some of these proposals originated years ago. There is still quite a disparity. So I'm a member of our upstate Democratic caucus, and there's a lot of support among the caucus. While there's an interest in moving in this way, and I still support it, we recognize there's a need for flexibility, especially given the 5-year planning window that I think kicks off this year or next year that you need to start planning on. So I recognize that, and I'm happy to, if that is the general sense, we are absolutely happy to take that back. Yes, thank you for mentioning it.
Because it sounds like it would be capital project after capital project if we had to follow that timeline, so I'm also in agreement. But in terms of the make school meals free for all, well, I'm a huge supporter of that. I'm just wondering, did you say that one of the downsides was the service?
Yeah, one of the issues that we've heard, and again, that's gotten a lot of traction. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the pros and cons, and it's something, again, I kind of got on the bill early because it made sense, and at least years ago, there were always more issues with stigma attached to the children that were receiving free lunch. So a lot of it made sense, but one of the comments is, given the staffing shortages, will that just exacerbate issues and concerns? And then there's always push and pull on so many other funding needs. Those who want more with pre-K, those who want more in the foundation aid or whatever the case may be. So there's push and pull on some of that, but no mistake, it's gotten a lot of traction. But would staffing be an issue? I guess I just need to. I'm just curious in the pulse check, because I hadn't thought about that originally until I heard it more this year about what it might take to implement.
So when we had free meals for all students, it was very popular. In fact, when we reached out to our community to get input on priorities for this upcoming school year, lower prices for lunches was a high priority for many. We struggled, though, when all lunches were free. Staffing was an issue, but supply chain was also an issue. And we often would hear from students that by the 4th lunch period, we were out of food. And I know our food service directors regionally were trying to work together, literally to borrow food from one another. Like, we're out of bread, so I can give you bread if you give me milk. I mean, I'm oversimplifying. I don't know if that has been relieved. I think the supply chain issues are not what they were a year and a half ago. I don't know, Andrew, if you want to add in?
From the conversation we had, I don't think the supply chain issues are near what they were. And
thankfully.
and I think the universal meals make sense.
Okay, so generally, and you think you could make it work? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That is good to hear. I mean, we still do have the supply chain issues, but
I think that. Oh, sorry. The staffing concerns for bus drivers, for cafeteria workers, those are still real concerns, but they are not as pressing as they were 2 years ago, I don't think.
Okay. All right. Good to know. It's still an issue, and because it's got the huge price tag on it, sometimes new initiatives like that, they become eyed that way. And I will say again, as the new higher ed chair, there's a lot of focus this year on higher ed because of the governor's proposed tuition increase for SUNY and CUNY, and we are trying to, what we call, buy that back, essentially, so that we don't impose a tuition increase on the students. And so, and of course, right now, we're at the early stages of the three-way because the Senate and the Assembly, we've already adopted our one House proposal, so the three-way agreement, the three-way discussions are just starting really today, and we are billions apart. So that's the other reason why that is going to be an impediment, especially you'll hear that over the next week. We kicked off with some of our joint budget conferences this evening, but we really, it was more ceremonial. I don't know what the better word for it is, because we are billions apart, and until they can get some agreement, and that will affect all of this. So I say that to say I feel very good about where we are with the higher ed budget. I feel very good about where we are with the pre-K to 12. This is when the reconciling over the next couple of weeks. But that is, again, not to, I'm just trying to present all sides. It definitely has a lot of interest. So we'll see. Sure, please.
Meals, I am in support of it. I know that some of our districts are using BoCEs if they're not able to provide staffing to accommodate for that, and then they're able to, use BoCEs to aid with that, back for that. But also, when the Lieutenant Governor was first promoting this idea, he focused strongly on encouraging local food sources and some diversity in meals. So I think that as we're looking at that, that would be something that I would hope that would be continued to be looked at.
Yes, and that I feel like we've made some real strides in with the challah food and the kosher. There's been real strides, especially in this city. Yes, so we're making some real inroads on that.
Great.
So yeah, all right, good to get that feedback. Very good. Any other? I didn't mean to totally focus on that and the buses. I welcome. I'm sure I missed some things, but those we are just trying to give the highlights.
Two unrelated questions.
Sure, please.
I think we all appreciate the support for UPK, but I'm sure you know that finding vendors has been a struggle for many districts. There was an article in the Times-Union today on this issue.
I missed it today, but I'm very familiar.
So any solutions for that?
This is the child care issue. So much, in general, the child care, we allocated $7 billion last year. I mean, it was just even I'm shocked, as we had. I'm also in the Women's Caucus, the Women's Legislative Caucus. For years, it was the #1 issue, and we were getting almost nowhere on it. We're just little inches. And, thought we hit this massive home run last year with this $7 billion allocated over multiple years, but it was considered quite the victory, right, after years and years of work. And the implementation has gone so slowly. The slots are moving because the workers aren't there, the vendors aren't there. It's just, so it's this, that's its own supply chain issue. It's a serious problem, and in higher ed, we're also dealing with a lot of workforce issues because all the licensing and professions comes under the higher ed committee. I feel like I need a PhD in healthcare policy these days, but it's the same issue from our hospitals, where you can't get the nurses, you can't get the nurses' aides. As you know, we have rolling closures on our ER. So it's a very similar issue, and I don't know what I feel like it's going to take a few years to turn some of these issues around. Pay, I think the pay rates are helping. Also, some of the $7 billion for the child care is now going to go, more of it's going to be focused on training and helping small businesses to open, and in-home. So, but even that is, that's going to take a while to hit the pre-K level. So it's somewhat maddening, quite frankly. But I feel like we're trying to do the right thing on getting the funding where it needs to be, but it's going to take a while to address the workforce issues. So I don't have any good answers, but happy to follow up on that.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and I know you've been wanting to do more on this for a number of years too.
Maybe a higher per pupil allocation for individual students. So currently we have $5,400 per pre-K student, which doesn't begin to cover the cost for the community-based partners that we have. Mm-hmm. So they feel, and rightfully so, and we're pleased they continue to work with us, that they can actually do better just by being independent and getting self-pay from parents who can afford it, and or the child care subsidy. So our allocation has increased from $300,000 to $600,000 to $1.4 million, and we could only spend half of our allocation this year, and we won't spend $1.4 million next year. So I think there's some structural changes that I know have been talked about a lot.
Yes,
That
yes.
really need both from a statutory and a regulatory perspective.
Yes, I know in Albany, I think the rate was even lower because they were an early adopter, so I want to say it was $4,800 per
Right.
student or something, much, much lower, losing huge amounts of money on each child in the pre-K program. So
Yes.
we are adjusting the rate. How much it's going to affect that 5,400, we don't have those numbers yet, but I will follow up. It is a, it's a real issue, and as you know, how many years have we been at this, trying to make sure we have pre-K, universally available, and, you're not alone on this. So yes, we'll, happy to follow up on that one. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up.
That slot amount makes it extremely difficult for community partners to address staffing shortages with wages because their slots are already functionally below market value.
Yeah, okay. All right, we have raised this year after year. I know we have language in there about adjusting the rate, but I don't have the specifics, and I won't be given the specifics until these negotiations get underway. But I am told we are adjusting the rate, but how much it will affect the newer ones, I'm not sure. This is, it's the cost factor in the end, and but this is the kind of push and pull. And I'll check with a couple of other districts as well who have not fully adopted as well because of this. So we'll get up, and maybe you have a sense of it too with the others. Yes, okay, we will follow up. It's been your
Anderson and
project.
The
Yes.
other thing I'll say about pre-K, because I know that we've had conversations at this table, is that statutorily, it is a open lottery for those precious slots, and we would love to see some kind of weighting system to give those families most in need a better shot at getting one of the slots. Right now, it's wide open, and often, those who need it most are not being selected.
As you know, I fully agree with you on this, and I appreciate that is the desire here. We get serious pushback on this.
I'm
That
sure.
it is intended to be universal, and that there would be a stigma, and more and more and more. I'm going to go back at that one again because I appreciate that the district is really trying to make sure that you are funneling that. It's unfortunate that we haven't been able to make more inroads there. Again, I see some of the reasoning, but I fully agree with what you're attempting to do. So okay. I've got my homework here. Of course, please.
Sorry, I won't monopolize the time otherwise. The governor's proposed a $1 state increased tax on combustible cigarettes, but not including vaping products, is my understanding. And the schools are really struggling with an increased use in vape products in the middle schools and in the high schools. I was just wondering what the Assembly's position was on that.
I don't know where we are with the dollar. All of the attention has been given to the menthol cigarettes and the banning. We did not adopt the governor's proposal on that. Personally, I have mixed feelings on that because of the health consequences. But that is a very big pushback. It's quite a rather ugly debate, especially in the city. And there are members who feel very strongly on both sides on that, and the Assembly has chosen not to adopt that. I think we should. I think the governor is right on that, and I want to say we did increase the tax, but I'm going to have to go back and check. All the attention has gone on the menthol and the menthol cigarettes. So that's been dominating the debate, and I'm afraid we're not supporting the governor's proposal. Quite frankly, I think it's well intended, but I think because there's so much pushback, especially in communities of color, where there has been a higher take-up rate, there's a higher usage of menthol cigarettes. So it's and the convenience, right? Even though it's presented as more affecting the communities of color, truthfully, I think it's the convenience stores that have lobbied very hard to not prohibit those. And I want to say we didn't do the dollar as well, but I'm going to have to check on that. Sorry, that one I don't have off the top of my head because it wasn't as much of an upstate fight.
Thank you so much.
I
Assembly
really
member.
appreciate you accommodating me, and it's just something I like to get out at least once a year to talk to before the budget's final. That way I can still hear and try to follow up on a number of these issues, but please know I'm always a call away, and happy to come back after as well. Hopefully it'll be mostly good news. It's always mixed news, but hopefully it will be mostly good news. And I have to also say thank you for the service. I know the board members are unpaid and the volunteer work, and I feel bad that I keep you even later than you. But I really appreciate the interest and the feedback, and incredibly proud to represent this district. Incredibly proud. Now with my higher ed hat on, everywhere I go, I am hearing about students who are not as prepared for college, the COVID wave of students going into higher ed. And so much of it is the districts that were shut down for so long, especially a number of our urban districts. And I know you just bent over backwards to try to keep the schools open as much as possible. And I commend you for all you did throughout COVID and continue to do. So very proud to represent you. So please follow up with any of this. I really always welcome the feedback and the input, and happy to come back after the budget passes as well, and hopefully bring mostly good news. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me if I run out. As much as I want to hear your budget highlights,
don't.
I have a lot of homework. We are back in marathon meetings again tomorrow. So, okay, thank you. Thank you,
so
everyone.
much for your time. So I think we were just starting Q&A, and we'll open it up to any questions. I have some from last time, but I'll open it up to anybody else first. Rebecca?
So I saw that quite a bit of our grant-funded funding for next year is being used for social emotional supports. I think there was, I wrote this down this afternoon, so it might be wrong, but 3.2 FTE for like counselors and social workers, and 1.0 FTE for a nurse. And again, that was under the grant funding category. And I'm just worried about, planning for next budget cycle, transitioning that grant funded, really important staff support for the next year. And I realize, we're focused on this year right now, not next year, but I am concerned about that.
So it's a balancing act. We have not wanted to spend too much of our grant money on FTEs because it creates a funding cliff. However, there's expectations within the grant that we do spend it on staff to support social emotional well-being of our students. So that's why you see us making this big move around middle school staffing this year, so that next year we can look at what we will be able to bring back in to the general operating budget. At the same time, we don't want to leave any of that money on the table. So we recognize the same thing. So good point. It's a great call.
Judy?
I have a couple. Let's see. One of my questions is, how are we going to refill our cash reserves after we're being clobbered this year with all the things? What do we do so that we have cash reserves when we, have emergencies or whatever?
So the line item for the tax surcharge claims, let me back up. Our budget this year, the biggest disruption, as we've talked about, is paying these claims, both paying them and then the legal expenses associated with defending the district's interests in those. There is the money that is in the budget for next year is when we have finality with sort of the totality of the claims, we have the ability to bond that. It doesn't make sense fiscally to bond it until we know what that amount is, but that will let us have leeway in sort of recouping what we've spent cash on this year for those reserves. And then were things to go better than, we have to be prudent and plan for what our exposure is. But if things are not as bad as the worst case scenario, then that is additional flexibility there. And I think alluding to this, the first question as well, every year's budget is for that year, but it's part of a larger strategy as well. And so next year's budget is making moves to also then set up for the following year's budget.
We have such a huge increase this year in benefits costs. Have we known, I mean, it went, the health insurance and whatever, have we known that this was coming?
Yes. This is a nationwide trend.
Okay, well, yeah, but it's so big.
It is so big. We are part of a consortium that is very beneficial and has done a very good job at lowering our costs. Mm-hmm. And this is the catch-up of sort of things hitting, right? So overall, across the country, utilization of healthcare services went down during COVID, right? When the pandemic first hit, when the quarantines were happening, people didn't engage in routine care, they put off things, and then as they started to use those services, the spending increased, and because our rates are based on our utilization, that then lags, so that hits us. So we knew that there would be a large increase coming.
Yeah, I mean, you had said that it was pretty level for a while, and things have been going up.
Yeah. And it still is over 5 years, even including that really large even including the substantial increase for next year, our 5-year average is under 3%.
Is under?
Under 3% per year, which is very good for healthcare. It's one of the it's one of those fastest growing cost drivers.
Right.
So we are still doing well, and I don't anticipate a large increase the following year at anywhere near this scale.
So we'll level back off again.
Well, increasing, but yes.
Yeah, but I mean, it won't be such a
yes.
large increase.
That's the hope.
Okay. And one more, and this is just personal maybe. Do we have money for more teaching assistants, not aides and monitors, but is there any way, I did see a large ad in the paper for more teaching assistants, and I volunteered, and I'm doing the same thing I used to do when I was paid. I just do a tiny little bit, but the difference it makes to a teacher to have a teaching assistant in the classroom who can handle maybe the neediest kids so the teacher can get around to everybody else. That difference is huge. The people I work with have all said, oh, it's such a difference from what we have. And I don't know if we have more money or just we don't have people who are coming to fill those positions.
It's choice 2.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why we ran that ad. We have had, I think we're up to about 20 applications that we've received from that. So
oh, good.
Yeah, we have multiple positions that are still open.
Yeah.
So we're actively trying to fill all those and continue that into the next year.
And is there money in the budget?
Yeah.
Tell there is money,
yes,
so that we would have
open positions right for this school year. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll let somebody else go for a while.
Follow-up from Judy's first question. So from what I am understanding is that, so if the worst case scenario is planned out in the budget, right, for these tax tertiary claims, but if it doesn't end up being that, does those extra funds go back in the fund balance?
Well, they're in the general fund.
Okay.
So our budget for next year, that line item has the money that it would cost to bond out our exposure.
Okay.
Which goes back to sort of the way tax tertiary reserves also work, which is the tax tertiary reserves, you put in your potential exposure, and then you monitor it, and then if you don't actually pay it, then you take it back out of the reserve. This is doing it not through a reserve, but through the budget, because the exposure will be that particular year.
Okay. Thank you. I had a couple of questions, unless other people have questions. I think I asked these last time. Dr. Wiles, you said you were going to talk a little bit about the SRO at the middle school and the impact on the middle school.
Actually, I was going to invite Mr. Laster to talk more about the impact of the SRO, because he's seeing it every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about that new position at FMS. Officer Chris Carano started with us right after the winter break, and as I said at the time, I went into this relationship and partnership looking at it as another resource to help support our students at the middle school, and another staff member that our students could form relationships with so that they have that sense of belonging, which we know is so important, especially for the middle level child. And I can tell you in short order, that has happened quickly and in a very, very effective manner. Chris has a wonderful way he communicates with the middle school students. Because of those quick relationships that have been developed, information has been shared both with him and other members of the administrative team that has resulted in us supporting students who have made some poor choices in the last few weeks at the middle level. But without his involvement, I don't know whether that information would have come our way. So in terms of evidence of effectiveness, I would point to sort of some of that relationship building that he's done and the information that we have received because of that. We also had an 8th grader have an opportunity recently to do a job shadow with him. And that was a wonderful day for our 8th grade learner from Seneca. He spent some time with him not only at the middle school, but he went over to the station, and he actually was able to go to the shooting range to observe them testing a gun, which was pretty cool for him. It was a highlight of his year, I think, when you spoke to the students. So really happy to have him on board, and I think things are going well. But as you know, as everything, it's only 2 months into our relationship. So I think as we move forward, I look for opportunities to sort of enhance that and make sure he's meeting the needs of the kids as they come forward. So him and I are actually talking about are there opportunities for professional development that he's aware of that involves sort of how principals and school resource officers can help support the school environment and school climate. So those are some of the things that we're starting to look at, whether or not there's things like that we can learn together, because again, this is a new relationship for both of us. So.
Name at the high school, sorry.
Ralston.
Thank you, Ralston. So I'm assuming that he's able to probably do more work and not have to, I don't know how often he was going to the middle school.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Piscatelli's going to
so when we only had one SRO for the district, he was spread between 7 buildings. So now I think Chris has gone to some of the elementary schools to help with some of the safety drills. I know he's assisted some of our elementary principals with some of the stuff that they've been dealing with, which has allowed the SRO at the high school, Officer Ralston, to sort of focus his energies up here supporting the 9 through 12 students. Yeah, and I will also say I'm grateful for Officer Matt Hanslick and Officer Patty Stallmer, because this week actually is the week that Chris is getting his SRO training. So he's actually up in Saratoga this week to get his SRO certification. So in the interim, we actually have Matt and Patty stopping in to fill in this week. But even before this week, they were mentoring him. So quite often since January, we would either have Chris and Matt, or Chris and Patty, or sometimes we'd have all 3 of them in the building, which has been great. So.
Okay, thank you.
Aren't we lucky to have
a police department that we have such a good relationship with, and that they have officers like this who work so well with our students? I just, kudos to them and kudos to us.
24/7, 7 days a week.
Yeah, aren't we lucky? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Mike.
While they're going back to I just want to point out on the SRO topic that Cap Region BoCES has created a network of school district SROs who are meeting regularly.
Oh, good.
And the next meeting is in April, and it's a joint meeting of SROs and superintendents. So your idea, Mr. Laster, I'll suggest that maybe there's a joint meeting of regional SROs and principals to talk about your work together. And the goal is to come up with what are those topics for professional learning that can best be shared among the group. And I know we have some DEI interests. So that's all woven in there. So we're very thankful for the help from our BoCEs to bring that to life.
Go ahead, Blanca.
I noticed that we have a line added for a part-time monitor at the high school. Is it
Actually, point one is, I believe it's, yeah.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
10 hours.
So my question is that enough?
Mike's a little taller than I am.
I feel your pain.
No, the purpose of that increase is actually to take some part-time positions and make them full-time so that we can have more full-time staff. Because the problem we have right now is when we have a few monitors that are like on 4-hour shifts, and we have to keep tweaking when their workday begins and ends. And lunch tends to be a big, right now, because we have to focus most of our monitor attention in the cafeteria. This will allow us to have more staff moving around the building and monitoring the rest of the building while students are in the cafeteria.
Great. Thank you.
I think I had a question based on, I don't know if it was directly related to the monitor, but we talked before about safety specifically with kids using the bathroom in the high school. Sorry, Mike.
He's getting his steps today.
Sorry.
Well, that's okay. Mike let me off on the first question. So, no, vaping clearly is an issue. I mean, it's an issue just by coincidence. Our assistant principals, which this hasn't happened in a long time, had a regional meeting on Friday with, I think it was 50 assistant principals met to discuss issues that are happening around the suburban council. Consistent across all the districts, everybody's seeing problems with vaping. So we recognize it's been a problem, and it has been for a while. Things that we do on a regular basis is our monitors go into the bathrooms and do sweeps, periodic sweeps in each bathroom. We have a sign-in log that's in every bathroom so that we log in when they're in there. That helps us if we have to go back to the cameras. We know when the last adult was in the building. Bathrooms are equipped with vape detectors. If we see large groups of students that go into a bathroom, either the monitor goes in and breaks up the group and sends the students out, or they call for a male administrator. If it happens to be a female, sees a large group in the male, they'll call for a male to go in and break it up. So we do that. And then when we do discipline, and we do discipline quite a bit of students for violating, bringing a tobacco product into the school, one of the things we try to do is, if it's your first offense, there is an assignment that students that are allowed to do that will reduce the suspension from a 3-day suspension to a 1-day suspension. And we revamped it this year to try to beef it up and make it more meaningful for the students. It's all about the dangers of vaping, doing some research on the topic. They have to write an essay about it and submit it to their assistant principal. If they complete that and complete that activity, we reduce the suspension. But then if that happens again, it's a 5-day suspension out of school.
Do students take advantage of that, like that?
Almost every student takes advantage of that, so.
And are breaking the code of conduct. Do you let Dave Austin know?
Yes, it's automatic. Dave's copied on every suspension that we have, and he references against the athletic teams as well.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
I just have a question, Dr. Wiles, about the virtual Q&A last night, and what topics people brought up. I know that you said there were a handful of people that attended.
So one of the other things that the Communications Committee was working on this spring was trying to expand the kind of feedback we get from our community. We had a concern that the thought exchange didn't gather. We should triangulate what we hear from our thought exchange. So we had scheduled 4 online focus groups. We ended up getting I think 12 people sign up. So we condensed it down to 2 sessions that happened last night. These were facilitated by Patrice Viverito, our communications specialist, and her manager. We kind of they came to the conclusion that it would actually allow people to speak more freely if they didn't have administrators sitting there sounding defensive. And apparently that went fine because it troubled me not to be there, but it all went well. And so I can share in the two groups some of the themes that came up. Social emotional learning and social emotional wellness was big, especially at the K-1 level. The first group was all about elementary school. So that came up, and I think our elementary principals would agree that we've seen a lot of behavioral issues at K-1. They reaffirmed the importance of keeping a low class size and appreciated that we're doing that at the elementary level, and we're keeping an eye on it with our unassigned positions. They talked about having better pay for substitutes. They liked the idea of building subs. I think all 5 of our buildings have attempted to have building subs, but as soon as we hire them, they get hired into full-time positions elsewhere. So it's a constant revolving door of trying to support them. In the second group, these were a little bit more secondary. There was interest in having more interscholastic sports for grade 6, and there was someone on the call who understands the ins and outs of this, and we can't have interscholastic until 7th grade, but we can have intramurals. There was conversation about class size at the middle school, a lot of appreciation for the effort we're making at that level, but class size at the high school was also mentioned. Safety and security was a hot topic, even with a suggestion that we create our own security detail, which we hadn't thought about before in that quite in that way. Esports was also recognized as providing another avenue for students to connect with students. There was a lot of interest in painting things, like getting rooms and in middle school and high school to repaint rooms to brighten them up, make them more attractive. Not sure why all that came through, but it did. But it came up numerous times. And then there was interest in redoing our weight room to expand it, upgrade it, and so on. But people were appreciative of the opportunity to come and share. And I think, we had low participation, but I would call it a successful opportunity, and we'll look maybe to expand it down the road. And my thanks to Patrice and Monica, who did a ton of work to get ready for this. So,
Judy?
This is a very quick question, or should be a quick one to answer. Looking through the budget, I'm just wondering, is money for the principal and interest payments, which was up 47% or something, is that normal, or is that just because of projects that are ongoing?
Principal interest, is that capital? Oh, yeah. So that's because we have another project coming on.
Okay.
So that's part of
what
our
I was hoping.
plan, yes.
Yeah.
No, it's part of the long-term management of 2 capital projects.
Okay, but so those numbers depend on where we are in capital projects.
Yeah, so we're taking on more borrowing. There'll be more aid going forward.
And this year we had COVID and all those delays and everything else. Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm done now.
It's my last question. So
Sure.
the last presentation, when you showed the budget numbers, you had the DEI teacher on special assignment included in that?
So for next year, the DEI teacher on special assignment is in the federal dollars, really to try it out, see how it goes. Initially, and I think Matt was here earlier, initially Matt put in a request to have additional clerical support. But then when we talked about, well, what do you need help with, it was really the nuts and bolts of the work. Professional development, working with students, vetting resources, connecting with parents. So that's what's in the grant. And it would be a high priority, to Rebecca's point, to see how, if it in fact helps us accomplish our goals, how we would build that in going forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Good evening, all of you who are administrators. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have a public comment. And this was sent to us via email, so I will read this. He says, Dear Gilderland Board of Education, March is Women's History Month, a good time to share some highlights from the history-making, groundbreaking, first-ever Gilderland Girls Varsity Wrestling Team, which last month concluded its inaugural season. In the 21-22 season, there were 2 girls who competed on the boys' team. Those same 2 girls returned and led a recruiting effort. They spent the fall talking with students, reaching out to girls' sports coaches, collaborating with administration, and using their resources, including social media, to get the word out about a new opportunity for girls at GHS. The 22-23 season started and ended with 8 girls on the new varsity team. Some of the girls have played other sports, others were looking for an opportunity to join a team and were inspired by the door that was newly opened for them. All 6 new girls on the team were new to wrestling and showed incredible personal and physical growth throughout the season. The girls competed in 6 dual meets, 6 tournaments, and 3 other interscholastic wrestling events. The season brought wins and losses to all girls. Gilderland Girls Varsity Wrestling also had a state place finisher. As parents, we are grateful for the coaches who worked with the team. Don Favreau, JP Huslander, Vincent Gallo, and the assistants supported the girls and were in their corner on and off the mat. They encouraged the girls to always do their best and not give up. Their dedication to the girls and the team was a key factor to the successful season. They helped to create an atmosphere where the girls felt a strong sense of belonging in a space where they previously did not feel welcome to enter. The team is already looking ahead to next season and thinking about recruiting more girls and how to make it to states. Women's wrestling is growing exponentially around the country, providing opportunities that previously did not exist. We are proud that our girls are part of this moment in history. It takes courage and conviction to be the first in anything. The returning and new members of the team took ownership of their experiences and the legacy they are leaving for future generations of Dutchmen. As a team moves into the future, we know that they will need the support of the district and the athletic department to continue to grow and open doors for more girls. We appreciate your support and promotion of more opportunities for female athletes. Sincerely, Amy Horalchuk and Nicole Kennedy. Attached is a picture of the girls' team at a banquet. Okay. I know Linda's not here, but I didn't see any other public comments. And so I think the last item, we're just going back to that discussion up on the agenda with communications. Gloria, did you have something you wanted to say? When I think when Dr. Wiles was speaking, we couldn't get your audio.
Is it working?
Yes.
Well, it doesn't look like the date we picked is going to work anyway. That's not a good date because we do have another commitment that night. So unless there's another proposed date, I'm open to suggestions.
I'll jump in here and suggest that why don't we go back to what we've done past years for this year, and then regroup and look at next year with fresh eyes about what this should be. I actually added this very topic to the agenda of my Suburban Council of Superintendents, which is coming up, to see what our neighbors do, because I think everyone does something right around this time, but I don't know in particular. So I suggest we do some more homework, we think more about it, we go forward with the workshop on do's and don'ts of campaigning, and go from there.
Okay.
Gloria, are you okay with that? I know you're our chair, I'm sorry.
I'm fine.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So unless there are any other comments, I'll have a motion to adjourn. Oh.
So fast. I just want to congratulate Andy Maycock on the production of Beauty and the Beast. It was a fantastic production, and I noticed you didn't go on stage to get clapped for, so here's a golf clap for you. It was fabulous. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, it was an amazing show. that's what I've just heard nonstop too from others, so that was great. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Katie, second Kim, all in favor? 9-0, thank you, everybody.